ThePrint off the cuff. Presenting partner Edelweiss. Exchange partner NSC. Experience partner The Quorum. Beverage partner Shivas Lux Collective Perfumes.
This is not the kind of world that we thought we had been prepared for. In my lifetime as a journalist, also in my adult life, and I claim adulthood from age 16. In my adult life, we've seen the Yom Kippur War and the oil crisis. We've seen the Iran-Iraq war that went on for 8 years, which included a big tanker war, each side trying to take down the other's tankers. So that was another big oil crisis. 1990, 91, the occupation of Kuwait and the first Gulf War, Desert Storm, then the second Gulf War, Operation Iraqi Freedom. Something like this that involves so many countries and brings in the US so fully is a first time. And also, it's the first time something like this is happening, not just in the presence of social media, but social media fueled by AI. So you see these videos coming up all the time claiming this or that, and they look very real. But then I go to who else but to the usual suspect. I go to Grok and ask, is this real or fake? And I would say the strike rate is 49 out of 50 have turned out to be fake in today's context. You might be told that this is a real video, but this was a power plant that caught fire in China 5 years ago. Or this is something that happened in some country in 2022. So this is a world at war like this in a very volatile environment, and we need sane voices to make sense of it, sane, well-informed voices. And we could not have found someone saner and better informed than C. Raja Mohan. Raja, thank you very much for coming all the way to Bombay. You are much in demand, I know. Raja, if I may draw you in to give us a 360-degree picture as you see it of the world and where India sits in it.
Thank you, Shekhar, for inviting me for this very prestigious program, the OTC. Second, I think it's wonderful to be in Bombay. I think especially to talk about foreign policy, because I think for too long, the Delhi dominates all the discourse on foreign policy. But if you even just look back a bit, it was the three great port cities of India, Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, that actually were at the heart of India's engagement with the world for almost through the British period and much later. And today, increasingly, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, the industrial, technological hubs, they've also become the sources of engagement with the world. But Delhi, in a way, is actually, in some ways, the most backward of the rest of India where it is progressing. But unfortunately, foreign policy remains concentrated in Delhi. But I think, especially when it comes to Gulf, and Bombay had a historic role. Much of the engagement with the Gulf, including Iraq, Iran, and the Trucial Coast, were all run from Bombay government. It was not even run by Calcutta. It was the Bombay presidency that ran the affairs of the Gulf. In fact, it had an office in Bushehr where the representative of the Bombay government was there, and he had agents operating the rest of the Gulf. The Indian Navy takes its origin to something called the Bombay Marine, which was set up in 1601 or around that time, to protect the trade that was arising out of the Surat, the first East India Company factory in India. That was in Surat. But because of the piracy, you needed a naval force, so the Bombay Marine was set up to deal with it. And of course, historically, we've seen the engagement here. There's the Sassoon docks, or the linkage between the Arab world and here, and Iran, and this part of the world. But today, I think when we look at what's happening there and its impact on India, just wanted to make three sets of points, Shekhar. The first is the nature of the war. What is this war about? Second, a bit about where are we 1 month after the military campaign began on state of the war and diplomacy, and finally a bit on the Indian position and some of the issues that have arisen about it. First, I think what a part of the problem in the way the war is being seen, certainly in India, because Iran is seen as the underdog and US is seen as the big bully, there is a sense of the empathy for Iran in a big way. There is, because you see Iran being hammered by US-Israeli military power on a daily basis. But I think it's not a conflict between US and Iran or Israel and Iran that has begun this year or even last year when there was a bombing. The very origin of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the 1979 revolution, framed its worldview in fundamental contradiction with America and Israel. So death to America, death to Israel are core part of the Islamic Republic's agenda. And I think dealing with this problem has been a challenge for US and Israel. Within Israel and the US, the liberals and the Democrats felt there's room for reconciliation, but the Republicans have always felt there was no room for reconciliation. Therefore, there's a war, that this conflict was something in the making for at least 47 years. So this must be seen as something that has suddenly erupted. Second, this is not just a war between Iran and the Americans and the Israelis. At a much deeper level, it's actually a conflict between Iran and the Arabs. We see the Arabs as a passive player, but I think part of the problem we've not debated enough in this country. One of the core principles of the Islamic Republic of Iran was to establish a new political order in the Middle East. More Arab than the Arabs, more Islamic than the Arabs, though Islam came from Arabia, more Islamic than the Arabs, and a willingness to overthrow the existing regimes, whether it was the secular dictators like Saddam Hussein or the conservative sheikdoms of the Arab Gulf. So it presented itself as a liberator of the Middle East from the old order. Therefore, the conflict is actually much more serious for them. And today, at least a part of the Gulf, does not see Israel as the principal threat, but actually Iran as the threat. And I think it's important to understand this, to see the dynamic of this conflict. So that's the first point. The second point I wanted to say, where are we, the state of the war at this point? My sense is, if Americans had imagined it will all be done in 4 days, I think that is where Trump speaks every day, speaks a lot of things. But I think from the beginning, at least the military side, people are saying, look, at least take 4 to 6 weeks. We're at the end of the 4th week, we're at the beginning of the 5th week. So I think I would say it's not better to hold your judgment on where this war is going. And I think Iran has done better than most people have expected, because it's important to understand the IRGC has nothing to lose. It's a fight for their existence. If you see as a threat to when Americans talk about regime change, it's about changing the political order inside Iran. So for them, this is about their survival. They're willing to burn the whole region down. And therefore, they're widening the war while the Americans are fighting a conventional military conflict. What the IRGC has done is really to widen the conflict, to draw more people, and to make an effect on the global commerce so that everybody feels the pain. In that sense, it has inflicted a lot of pain on the rest of the world and hopes that that pain will force the US and Israel to step back. And I think here, we all know war is a test of political wills actually in the end. And the question is now the endurance of whether the United States can endure the pain and manage this, or the IRGC can hold the extraordinary devastation that's going on in Iran. So this is where I think a month later, it's important to remember, for all the defiance, in the end, resources matter. Military power matters. I mean, it's good old comrade Stalin who asked, how many divisions does the Pope have? A Pope might have great moral power. You might be great in your underdog fighting the big bad Goliath. But the fact is, in the end, the military power, the gap between the two is going to make a difference. Whether the US has the political will to sustain it, that is the question. And whether Iran, the IRGC can hold on until the pain becomes unbearable, I think that's where we are. My sense is when we talk about Iran, I think it's important it's not Iran as a whole. The Islamic Republic, has very little legitimacy at home. If you see even the protests in December, January, it was not just the radical liberals, it was the Bazaris who protested because the economic condition is in a horrible situation. The regime, from the beginning, has been one of the most repressive. You remember the women's protest 2 to 3 years ago. So this notion that there is Iran as a coherent, unified Iran. Actually, you have a deeply divided Iran. And I think it's important to understand that. And the IRGC's ruling by force, but that doesn't mean it can sustain the will of the people. So there is a gap between the state and the society. Now, which one will prevail? It's not easy for people to come out onto the streets, but I think we should not forget that core tension that exists. Diplomacy, can this be fixed? Trump even today said, look, I'm ready to talk. He's constantly praising the Speaker of the Parliament, who they think is their partner, a chap called Kalibaf. And yesterday, this morning to Financial Times, he said, yeah, he's been very good. He's released 10 more ships. So we're doing great. And in fact, he says, I want Iranian oil. Like in Venezuela, what is done, eventually goal is to get hold of Iranian oil and make Iran great again. So on the one hand, you see him mobilizing military power. More troops are coming in. And at the same time, he's negotiating, trying to put more pressure on them. How this will play out, I think, is something to be seen in the next few days. We'll see April 6th is a deadline, whether that will play out. But there is room for compromise. We must also be clear. 3 demands US has put: complete end to nuclear program. Second, constraints capping the missile program and stopping the support to the proxy groups across the region. That is Hamas, you have Hezbollah and Houthis, who really are backed by Iran. So this is broadly the demands. And in return, the US is willing to lift all the sanctions and bring back economy onto shape. For Iran, of course, they want control over the entire Straits of Hormuz. They want defense of their allies in all these militia groups, and they want guarantees that the US will not do this again. On the face of it, there is a lot of gap, but I think there could be interesting ways in which this can be fixed in the coming years. And finally, where is India? I think there's a lot of, if you read the Indian newspapers, that India has not taken a balanced position. The fact is, the objective was not to take a balanced position. That India has taken, considering its interest today in the relationship with the United States, with Israel, and above all, more than US and Israel, India's relationship with the United Arab Emirates and the Gulf Arabs has become so deep that protecting those equities on the Arab Gulf side, 10 million Indians, almost 9 plus, most of our oil trade is with them, most of remittances come from there, your state of employment, the linkage today between the two, is so deep. So for India, it's not a all-saint society sitting there and say who's right, who's wrong. A lot of people think that was what Indian diplomacy was today, the clear recognition of India's interests has seen India take a position. That doesn't mean you don't talk to Iran. You have to talk and get your ships out. But the core interests, if you weigh them on a scale, if you put Iran on one side, Iran has barely 10,000 Indians. If you put the other side, the Gulf, Arab Gulf, there's no equivalence between the two. Therefore, I think India has made a choice. But that doesn't mean you don't engage the other side. So this is where India is. But my sense is, as the war goes on, the pain, I'm sure Shekhar has written about it most recently, it has exposed several weaknesses of India. For all the talk about energy management, we've not done enough reserves. We've not done alternative energy resources fast enough. We've not done the protection of the supply chains linked to the petroleum industry. A lot of it could have been done, but we've not done. Hopefully, this could be a way some of that can be managed. Second, I think on the defense side, the gap today between India's limited small missile arsenal. Iran has launched close to 1,000 missiles.
More than 1,000 ballistic missiles and more than 7,000 long-range drones.
So this is a new kind of warfare, and we saw a bit of it in the Op-Sindoor, but I think India is nowhere near prepared for it. And the focus on the DRDO and the PSUs as the fulcrum of your defense management. This is not going to work if you want to manage this warfare. You need your private sector to participate fully. to be able to produce the scale for defense production. So if you're investing in stocks, look out for defense stocks. If I see PM's advisor is sitting here, Neelkant, if things change, I mean, I think this is again, a lot of the argument is, are we doing the right thing? Is Pakistan doing better than us? If you look back and look ahead for even 1 month, what will be the Gulf like at the end of this war? They're going to spend enormous amounts on defense. In India, that is capable. Today, already South Korea is a big player in the Gulf. For us, I think, working with the Gulf, participating in their security, strengthening our own defense in the process is a challenge. But I would say a lot of the opportunities are going to open up, provided we think long-term and look ahead.
Yeah, and there'll be a lot of reconstruction.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
everything that's been destroyed will need to be rebuilt, and I think it'll be built even more grand and even more safe. So watch
Just add
that.
one small thing. I mean, I think Iran has huge potential, but at this point, because Iran is internally at war with itself, at war with the world, therefore the logic of working with Iran has been constrained by the nature of the regime in Iran. It's one thing to say to Gulf Arabs are traders, but if you have a bunch, Iran, for all the talk, it's not a trading nation. If you want to check every container to see what it has inside it. So you can draw lines on the map saying, we build these corridors. So Iran, unless the day the structure changes in Iran, then Iran will be the biggest player. And hopefully Iran and the Gulf Arabs will find some way of peace, which is what we should be looking for. And I think if that happens, our engagement with the region will dramatically grow.
So the end of the war is actually the best outcome for India, from India's point of view. Trick question, maybe not such a trick question. Is Trump nuts?
It certainly gives the impression he's nuts. I mean, every day he talks. But at the same time, you also see a level of strategy. I mean, I think if you see him, actually he's gotten away with it in Venezuela. He's coaxed the Gulf Arabs to shell out more money. And in fact, even after this war, the Gulf Arabs need Trump and America even more because the threat of Iran is not going to disappear. So I think in some ways he's reconstituting. I think the problem with Trump has been he's the desk officer for everything. He's killed the process. US was known for its process. The National Security Council has been gutted. Nobody else matters. We've seen his press conferences, right? His cabinet meetings. It's like a sultanate or, everyone praising the Lord, how great he is. So it's really everything he himself does. He picks up the phone and talks to the Kurdish leaders. While it's not the kind of thing you do, a president does. So I think partly the process, the failure in terms of the management is clearly a problem. But I think at this point, he's managed to get away with it so far. If he gets away with it, even in this one, then it doesn't look like he would be a fool.
Yeah. I mean, just to remind everybody that America at this point does not have a full-time national security advisor. That's an add-on job for Marco Rubio, for the country which rightfully claims to have the strongest military in the world and sees interests all across the world, across the globe, to function without an NSA and with the National Security Council Secretariat mostly gutted, as Raja put it, because that was the area that Elon Musk focused most of all, because that's what they saw as the deep state, isn't it?
No, I think Trump, because, you got to concede that the deep state hounded out Trump. He's fought 3 presidential elections. He thought he won this. He won all the 3, of course, he says. The second one, if you see the Biden administration, they threw everything they had at this man. From arresting him, putting him in a cling, taking his picture, like a typical New York police department, what it does. They went after him with every possible case. So in a sense, for him, even when we are not hounded out, we feel, paranoid, but this guy had every reason to be against the state. And I think the fact that he decides to take them on, and the fact that he had the support of the MAGA movement, of a large part of the American population, good or bad, you might not agree with them, that he's managed to come back. So in a way, the grouse against the deep state is quite central to him. And unlike in most other countries, it's not easy to attack the deep state. But he's managed to confront them the way he's confronted the army. If you see the defense secretary, I mean, he's quoting from Bible at the end of every press conference. So you have actually a bunch of people using religion, using all kinds of tricks to present themselves as something different from the liberals or the liberal conception of the American state. And I think that's a deep conflict within the US, and I think that's part of life.
I think the Secretary of Defense, he's either doing push-ups or quoting from the Bible, right? And invoking the Lord. Raja, before we open up to the audience, I know you have the microphone, we'll come to you in just a minute. There is a lot of discussion on how Pakistan's playing it. And I know I wrote 2 months back, Pakistan Se Azadi, that we should liberate ourselves from the Pakistan obsession. But there is a lot of debate on this. Pakistan's playing it better. Pakistan has found relevance again. Pakistan is trying to put together an Islamic NATO with Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and themselves. Just give us the picture on Pakistan.
I think it's really Pakistan envy, I think, seems so dominant in our discussion. That it's a pity that in India, which is today, its economy is 10x bigger than Pakistan's. 10x. Pakistan is stuck at $400 billion GDP aggregate. Is it under the 25th or 26th IMF program? Its per capita income is smaller than Bangladesh's today. Its elite is completely unconcerned by the economic situation. And they love playing these geopolitical games. I mean, it's only our little elite that's getting worried about this. Our weight today in the Gulf is far higher than Pakistan can ever bring. Because unlike Pakistan, which is constantly going to Saudi, say, give me $1 more billion, roll over this debt, I need this, So that today, the Gulf invests in India. We invest in the Gulf. Today, the nature of our relationship is much deeper, much bigger. As UAE is our biggest trading partner, there are more Indians in the Gulf than Pakistanis. That is the reality, but yet we've created a culture, I think, over the last few years, this obsession with what Pakistan does. And okay, Pakistan does diplomacy, even giving the maximum credit. But we shouldn't grudge. Saying Pakistan is still, for all its failures, is still 200 million people. Got nuclear weapons, it's got a location. The idea that they would be a cipher in the international system. That's a completely unreasonable expectation. But the fact is, Pakistan was even more important if you go back to the 50s. They were a member of the Baghdad Pact. They were a member of the CENTO. One reason why people say partition took place was the idea that Pakistan, the Muslim League before that, would back the Anglo-American interests in the Gulf, which the Indian National Congress would not do. So that relationship is a deep one. But if you see the last 75 years, Pakistan's weight in the Gulf has actually declined. But I think today they play a role. I mean, that's fine. I mean, you can, in the end, if anyone thinks mediators are going to fix the problem between Iran and US, I think it's fundamentally mistaken. You can facilitate something, you can create a meeting room, but the notion, look, US is the biggest power in the world. Israel now almost like a superpower. And Iran is a Goliath compared to the Arabs. I mean, these are big countries playing big games. The notion that Pakistan will kind of get something out of this, I think it's our fears because it tells something about our insecurity rather than the real world. And finally, about Islamic NATO. Look, I think one of the great realities of the last 100 years, nobody has been able to unite the Islamic world. The war today, the argument between the Gulf Arabs, Saudis, and Israel and Iran, two of the biggest Islamic countries. Today, Egypt has joined criticizing, Iran. That is the reality. I mean, to think that somehow Pakistan can fix Islamic unity, which the OIC has not been able to do. Arab, unity has not been possible. Pan-Islamism has not been successful. But I think it's a grand delusion. But I think we should be the last ones being worried about it because the history speaks for itself.
Yeah, in fact, if you look at the four in what's being projected as an Islamic NATO, and which can then do their stuff without any orders from the superpowers, one of the four is a member of NATO, Turkey. In fact, also hosts on its soil American nuclear weapons. Uh, the only Asian nation, although Turks pretend to be European, despite being about 3 to 4% in Europe. Egypt and Saudi Arabia, for all practical purposes, are American protectorates. And Pakistan is a Chinese protectorate. So some of these notions we have to always keep in mind, but I know that there is a Pakistan obsession. And if I see TV, for example, all the discussion is about this. That's the reason I thought I'll put it up to Raja first of all. Now, the question there. Yes.
Hi.
Why don't you stand up and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Hina Jaisinghani. I'm a founder of law firm in India and UAE based. So my question is very specific. This is regarding considering the geopolitical environment. My question is that do you see any FEMA challenges or overall any stricter regime overall in terms of FDI and ODI in terms of capital investment? Anything on that per se? Or it's going to be liberalized throughout the time, during the time.
You're talking about India?
The approach, yeah. In India, yes, for the capital investment.
I'm sure there are more knowledgeable people in the audience.
I mean, more knowledgeable people. Nilkant, you want to say something? Is this going to lead to a more liberal FDI regime or a more restrictive FDI regime in India? Is that your question? Yes. Huh.
Next to you, Mike.
Microphone is next to you.
I didn't come prepared for that. But yeah, I do think that the reaction to this will be, given that there will be, I think, demand for dollars and all that. Generally, we open up when there is pressure. So I would say that at the margin that should happen. But I must say that on the FDI side, there is not much more scope to open up. Because a lot of that, whatever had to happen, has already happened.
Yeah, I think FPI is the other one. Those guys have been dumping us. So India only reforms under pressure. India never reforms when the going is good. So I wrote 3 articles saying thank you, Donald Trump, right? Now I have to also say thank you, Donald Trump, and thank you, the Ayatollahs, because this pressure is. You've seen today, Government of India has opened up bids for large areas for exploration, offshore exploration. That could have been done much earlier, but India reforms under pressure. So things will happen like that. Dr. Anna.
Thank you very much. I was fascinated when you said that in Iran, the fight is between the state and the society. How much of the society, in your opinion, sir, is with the state, and how much of the society is against the state? Thank you.
Look, I think, Iran has been under internet lockdown. It's been under great, internal conflict over the last many years. So efficient polling is not the way to understand it. But at least I've seen some Iran studies professors, some of them are Iranian origin. What they say is that, look, there's not more than 20% in the population supports the regime. Yeah. But they're all institutionalized, right? If you have the military, even the military, they say is not as supportive. The IRGC, unrelated institutions, they control the levers of power. If you see last decade, I think
including the universities?
Sorry?
Including the universities, the areas of teaching?
Exactly. In fact, the urban people are the one who protested. If you see the last decade,
sure.
Every
so you're saying
third year there is...
So you're saying 80-20. 80 against and 20 with this.
80 is not organized. The 20 has all the levers of power.
Thank you,
that's
sir.
where the...
Thank you.
One other thing, earlier question on FDI, I might just add to what Nilkant said. Look, if you want to modernize your defense industry, while we talk about Atmanirbhar, actually it is going to come through collaboration. One reason I believe, at least the Prime Minister, the speculation, why he went to Israel just before the war, Prime Minister Modi that is, that post-Sindoor, the need for India to dramatically raise the quality, the technological quality of its armed forces means you need substantive modernization of India's defense industry, and you need partners for that. Production will be here, but you need technological collaboration, foreign investment, foreign capital. I see that if the Rafale deal actually goes through, if the Tatas are the ones who are going to do something here, you see one element of that. If the German deal on the submarines goes through, you're going to see some, Mazagon docks doing some of that. So you're going to see actually more and more collaboration. And now Ukraine, one of the interesting developments. In the last few days, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar have signed up with Ukraine to develop the drone factories.
Mutual defense agreements.
So I think we're going to. I think our steep learning curve, steep production curve, will require foreign collaboration, and I think so. Therefore, that could be a major source of new investment.
Yeah. Just yesterday, Adani handed over the first 4,000 of the
Small guns.
light machine guns.
Yeah.
So I will tell you a little story. In 1985, I think, 85, 86 or thereabouts, I used to then work for India Today, and we were told by the Ministry of Defense that India was now designing its own small arms, that is rifles, carbines, machine guns, etc. They all come from the same family. And it was a lab in Pune that was doing it. So I did go there, they showed me all these weapons, and they said this is fantastic, and also because we are using plastic butts, these are also environment friendly, and next year they'll be in service. It's been 41 years, right? The only time you saw them in service here and there, that's the INSAS system, Indian Small Arms System, was with the paramilitary forces. The army got some and said, these don't work, or there are problems with it, these are very high maintenance. So India, all this while, as Raja said, given this combination of DRDO and defense PSUs, and these were not even PSUs then, these were ordnance factories, under Ordnance Factories Board, like government departments. We have not even built a handgun, a proper Indian handgun in all of these decades. And a lot of that's now going to change. So these are in a joint venture, these light machine guns. The Armed Forces order was delivery over 7 years, but they are now saying they'll deliver over 3 years. So that is the immediate difference that you see between Ordnance Factory Board and commercial organizations. So commercial interest is coming in, and I think, Raja, you will agree that India could then become a production base for many other brands outside. Because one thing no one will produce in China is weapon systems.
Already India exports some weapons. Most of it goes to the US. I mean, you'll be shocked. I mean, it's actually is what the Tatas and other companies are doing with Lockheed and Boeing. I mean, doing some of their sub-assemblies in India. So that is the volume of that is sufficiently large for India today. US is the biggest destination. But I think if you see the C-295, the Tatas are assembling it in Gujarat. If you see more of that, then you'll see, I think, Indians actually becoming part of the Western supply chains on the defense side, or making arms to export them. I think all that requires actually opening up of the sector. I think only we've seen some tentative steps in the direction.
Good evening. My name is Utpal Almola. I'm a partner with KPMG in India. Thank you for the insights. My question was more on, I was reading something about the whole Iran situation and something which you alluded to, that, Iran itself is pretty much disorganized internally. Do you see an implosion, within Iran, as a outcome, and which, even whilst the war ends, could actually be pretty much more hazardous for the world, because if it sort of sub-breaks into different groups and no central control, which despite the many negatives about the late Ayatollah, he still managed to sort of keep it under control. Do you see any potential implosion which could actually
So his concern is about the possibility of a Syrianized Iran.
That's right.
I think we are not in no one is control of that situation. Now, it can't be the war aim. Our objective is to preserve the unity of Iran. If the war has already gone to such an extent, if Trump's things look He can't just send his own troops. You'll need Kurdish troops or somebody else to come in. You will see moving in that direction. There will be, I think, Syrianization of Iran would lead to all kinds of problems. But that's what a war you can't control once you start a war. The dynamic of it, how it plays out, which is in a way, IRGC itself has done so-called mosaic defense, right? You actually given freedom to your own regional commanders. They're throwing weapons at even their friends, against Qataris or against Turkey, against Azerbaijan. So you have actually the fragmentation at some level is already taking place. Part of the problem with fragmentation, the immediate problem, if it is fragmented, it can't even negotiate an outcome that can be implemented. But I think the 4 weeks down the road into the war, how this cookie will crumble, whether actually the Kalibaf, this is the new smart guy who will do a deal like, Maduro's number 2 did a deal with Trump and holds the whole thing together. Let the democratic aspirations go to hell, but Trump and Kalibaf have a deal, and the deal can be implemented. That's one scenario. If the deal is not possible, then you will have to look at some point the fragmentation of internal politics will begin. Now, is it most revolutions happen or most breakups happen when the elite fractures. There are two ways in which the elite can fracture. You have the old elite, yielding place to new democratic, liberal, secular, whatever you want to call it. Other is you say, look, there's a moment where Iran is also full of minorities. The Baluch on a South Asian border, you have the Arabs in the Khuzestan in the south, you have the Kurds, you have the Azeris in the north. If that is the way the fracture takes place, we don't know. I mean, I think all those are possibilities at this point.
So 1979 was also elite fracture because Shah's elite fractured, and that's how Khomeini came in.
In fact, the army actually finally was the one which told Shah to leave.
Yes.
And I think that's what...
Yes. And the second thing is, I think everybody needs clarity on that Iran and Israel, have they always been enemies?
No, they were actually best friends under Shah of Iran.
They were allies.
In fact, they even developed a missile program together. It was a strategy of the Israel when it was fighting the Arabs, that to cultivate the non-Arab Muslims as your friends. So therefore, reaching out to Turkey, which is non-Arab, reaching out to Iran, and reaching out to Ethiopia, various other countries in Africa, as a deliberate strategy, cultivate the Arab periphery so that you have the contradictions there within the Muslim world that the Israelis always did not see the Muslim world as one single coherent whole. So there was always this contradiction between Arabs and non-Arabs. But today, if you look at Arabia, it is the domination of the non-Arab powers, Israel, Turkey, Iran, while the Arabs are disunited. So I think there are multiple dynamics, and I think Iran and Israel, they would be best buddies if regime change takes place. In fact, it is Netanyahu who has been the biggest champion. If you see most of his recent speeches, Iranian people, please rise and revolt, we will work with you. They openly support Reza Shah, who is the son of the exiled, the old Shah. And he's talking about having good relations with the Israelis. So I think that could change fundamentally. Because logically there's no contradiction between them. It is the revolutionary ideology of the Islamic Republic that made Zionism as a fundamental problem. Otherwise, in a realistic strategic terms, they're not neighbors. They have no territorial quarrels. They could actually think of working together.
Yeah. In fact, just to give you a little background, because everybody says traditional relations and all, under Iran, under the Shah, Iran was a key member of CENTO, where Pakistan was a member. That was the American Security Alliance to keep the communists out. In 1965 war, Iran transferred fighter planes to Pakistan Air Force. In 1971 war, Iran offered sanctuaries for Pakistan Air Force planes. Of course, Jordanians also transferred some planes to the Pakistan Air Force then. So this is a very complicated world. Until 1979, until the Shah fell, Israel and Iran were not enemies. But the basic premise of the Khomeini revolution was death to America and death to Israel. And that has prevailed. The second thing, before we take the next question, we talked about some
population figures. So I'll just give you some basic demographics. Iran is a very large country. It's 9.2 crore people, 92 million people. That makes it 1.5 times the population of all of the GCC countries together. That also because Saudi Arabia brings about 3 crore people. Second, the Syrianization of Iran will be a disaster for the whole world because Syria is only about 2 crore people. And it was the destruction of Syria after Arab Spring that sent out hordes of refugees all over Europe, Canada, US, and they have gone and distorted the politics of all those countries. In the process, all those countries, they are democracies, they are moving hard right. And that's why you see the hard right rising in most of Europe and this very strong anti-immigrant move. Also in Canada, if you see the newspapers today, I think Indian Express today, it says that earlier 52% of Indian student visa applications were accepted. Now it's down to 8%. So even though Canada is not under a conservative government, there is a very strong anti-immigrant mood. And Iran of 9.2 crore people, very well educated, it's in everybody's interest that Iran stays cohesive. That's my view. Second, we have to understand Iran's diversities. Iran is not a monolith. All Iranians are not Persians. In fact, if you go north, you will find Azeris. In Azerbaijan, which is a total population of 1 crore, Azeris are about 85 lakhs. In Iran, Azeris are about a crore and 60 lakhs. So Iran has twice as many Azeris as Azerbaijan does. Similarly, Iran has a large number of Arabs in the Khuzestan province. That's where most of the fighting with Iraq took place. It has Kurds up north, which have always been of a different view from the IRGC and from the ideology. And then on the eastern side, they share a 909-kilometer border with Pakistan. Across most of that border, the Baluch live. So Pakistan has about 40 lakh, 4.5 million Baluch. Iran has about 3 million Baluch. So these are on the peripheries of Iran, very strong, large minorities. And they are also not all Shia. The Baluch are not Shia, the Baluch are mostly Sunni. So Iran is a very diverse country. It's not a monolith, and frankly, it's in everybody's interest that Iran stays together. Question?
Thank you. It's been very fascinating so far. I'm Pranav. I'm one of the Young Professionals Fellow with CFR also. My question is twofold. Sort of when the dust is sort of settling down on this war, how do you think India more specifically and then the broader world is going to read this war? Is this going to be the war of necessities or is it going to be the war of choice? For necessity, you can sort of look at the Kuwait invasion and then how sort of on moral grounds different countries came in and sort of helped. And then the war of choice can be sort of expanded more generally across the Middle East with the involvement of the United States. How do you think the US and particularly India would read this? And the second question is, how is India hypothetically sort of preparing for the tensions between aspirations with being a key player in BRICS versus the G7++ or whatever that grouping might end up being? So just love your thoughts on that healthy tension in both these.
No, I think you're talking about the war of choice, war of necessity was really an American debate. So you would say at this point, Israel has certainly seen as it's a war of necessity, that Iran was a fundamental threat and that you have to eliminate this regime to deal with that threat. The US Democrats don't see it that way, while the section of the Republicans have seen it that way, that Iran as the very existence of the Islamic Republic is a threat, therefore rooting it out is in their interest. But as we know in politics, how it plays out in the end depends on how this is going to be read eventually. But in terms of what India, we see, I think there's too often this idea, we can control the other developments. You don't. This notion that government of India issues a statement, therefore it will alter the circumstances. No. Nobody else has a leverage. You see, the Iranians, what they do, what the Israelis do, what the Americans do, and how the Gulf responds. So it's a choice for us, often it's framed as a moral judgment, or of taking the correct position, of deciding who's right, who's wrong. All that you and I as academics can do it. But for governments, it must be a question of interest. And I think at $4 trillion, we are nowhere near shaping the global outcomes, even in the neighborhood. You can't shape the outcome. You can contribute to some of it. You can, peace or war, you can do a little bit of contribution. But in the end, our principal objective in a war like this is how do we adapt to it? How do we adapt to the outcomes? How do we reduce the impact of this war on Indian economy? Which is why, if you see last 2 weeks, the government is entirely focused on domestic management of cooking gas. People are fighting over gas cylinders. You need to, the prices, inflation, energy, supply chains, managing that is the highest priority. And externally, when the dust settles, as we said earlier, there will be opportunities in the Gulf. There would be problems in the Gulf, the way it plays out. So I think the important thing is to adapt to and respond to the circumstance, rather than somehow we seem to be in charge and we can make a moral statement and things would go all right. That was never the situation. Even the Americans can't do it. For us, I think we have a long, long way to go. And you can't do it in your own neighborhood. Can you control the elections of Sri Lanka? In Burma, for example, there's a massive civil war going on in the north. Can you shape the outcomes in Bangladesh? Okay, once in a while, you have an influence in your own neighborhood. But even there, you can't control other societies. So finally, this is about how do we manage the consequences? How do you limit the negative consequences? And how do you take advantage of potential way in which the situation could develop?
Before we come to you, I have some subscriber questions. Tanya Chakrabarti, who's an actuary professional, she's asking, is there a long-term foreign policy change that is possible for India due to the ongoing war and potential change in the world power equation?
I think the Indian position, people are saying, why is India's position not bad? I'm saying the India's position reflects the fundamental changes in India's foreign policy towards the Middle East that have taken place over the last decade and more. One, what are the three big changes? One, we own the Israeli relationship today under the BJP government. There's been Israeli ambassador, Shekhar, you would have known him, he used to complain always, the Congress government treated Israel like a mistress. Very intimate in private, but nothing in public. The Indian Prime Minister would not go to Israel. Indian Prime Minister would not host the Israeli Prime Minister. But defense thing will go on, technology stuff will go on, agriculture, this stuff, that stuff. Because the Congress governments were never willing to be seen, whatever domestic political reasons, we don't have to go into that, were willing to be seen with Israel. I think under the BJP, that has fundamentally changed. From the day he became Prime Minister, Mr. Modi has repeatedly said, my friend Bibi, and that we're not going to play this in secret, the relationship with Israel. We're going to be public, we're going to own it, and we're not going to be defensive about it. So that is a big change, and I think as a result of that, Israel has become a very important technological partner. And partly this was facilitated by the fact that Israel and some of the Gulf Arab countries have signed the Abraham Accords. So the normalization of relationship between a section of the Arab world and Israel has made it easier for us to make that shift. The second big change, I think, that has taken place is really the transformation of India's relationship with the Gulf Arab countries. Those of you remember in 1990 Kuwait, Saddam Hussein eliminated Kuwait from the map. And the government of India could not get the words to condemn what was, today people are so outraged. The whole of India, because you had people sitting in Kuwait, you wanted to get them out. Gujral went to Baghdad, hugged Saddam Hussein. I want to get my people out. So you could not condemn an invasion of one country by another.
And Akshay Kumar wasn't available to go at that point. That came much later.
So people today would take this moral posture because you needed to get them out. So I think and Kuwait it's only last year that Prime Minister went to Kuwait. It took us 30 years to normalize the relationship with Kuwait because they never forgot India was willing to abandon a country for all its talk about non-alignment, Arab solidarity, etc., because it wanted to please Saddam Hussein. So today, the personal equation Prime Minister Modi has built with MBZ, and all the phone calls he's been making to the Gulf Arabs leaders is the reflection of the economic stakes that have grown. 10 million Indians, as I said, the biggest trading partners.
40% of all our remittances.
So I think it's a different relationship. Here again, if you see Prime Minister, when Modi went to UAE in 2015, first time in 32 years. So you had actually, for all the talk about Arab solidarity, there was a neglect of these countries because they didn't fit into your worldview, which is what Mr. Modi has changed. And third thing I would say is really the willingness to do what we call minilateral engagement. When we say I to you to, that is India, UAE, Israel, and the United States. When we talk about IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, we're working with the Arabs and the Israelis and the United States and the Europeans. This is again a break from our traditional, one-sided policy. So today I think it's a different policy. It's already changed. So what we see today is a reflection of the change in our interests and our policy position.
Yeah, it's a very different Middle East vis-a-vis the Muslim states and Israel as well, because two of the largest Muslim states, Turkey and Egypt, have recognized Israel long time back, have hosted each other's embassies. Now with Abraham Accords, it's UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, and Saudi Arabia was getting there if 7th October had not happened. Saudi Arabia was on its way. So all that region is now changed. It's not how it used to be. But sometimes in the debate, the global south issue comes in. So there are many questions about that we are dumping the global south, we will lose support of the global south. I can also name a couple of people. Yeah, so Ishan Nair, how does India's position as a leading voice of the global south stand?
Look, I think, if I can be blunt, global south is a myth. This notion that there is some kind of a solidarity of the global south to deal with the world's problems doesn't exist. Okay, our government or diplomats might talk about it. That doesn't mean we all have to simply take it. Global south is fragmented, is differentiated. What is common between Singapore, $100,000 per capita income, and say Pakistan? When you talk about the 6 GCC countries whose per capita incomes again are at such high, today Qatar, UAE, Doha, Abu Dhabi, and Riyadh today, the big financial centers. That has nothing to do with those of us who are looking for capital.
And China calls itself Global South also, by the way.
So I think, look, there is a politics of Global South. That doesn't mean operationally it means anything. I'll just give you one other example. In the Gaza Accord, everybody in the Global South said Israel was doing genocide. Finally, how was the problem fixed? You have 8 Arab and Muslim countries, including Pakistan and Indonesia, issued a statement. We support Trump's Gaza peace plan, which was the most one-sided pro-Israeli peace plan. They support it first, then Trump goes with that to the UN Security Council and says, look, I've got a peace plan. And the UN Security Council passes a resolution, 13-0. The Chinese and Russians could have opposed just by putting their hand up. They didn't. Unanimously approve a Security Council resolution which hands over Gaza to one man, Donald Trump, not even the US president by definition.
And
so this is the state of the Global South.
It's not just one-sided in favor of Israel, it's also for Trump a humongous real estate project.
And his son-in-law has, I don't know if you've seen his PowerPoint by his son-in-law. I mean, how beautiful Gaza is going to look 5 years down the road, with Arab money, of course. So I think these are terms which have no operational meaning, but this is something India wants to maintain its equities in the Global South. China might be the second largest economy. I'm also Global South. But in the end, the real competition is, it is the Chinese capital that is going to the Global South. We're not able to compete with China. So to talk in abstract, there is some Global South that is standing up for the good against the evil West, that doesn't exist. Russia is negotiating with the Americans, the Chinese are negotiating with the Americans, a whole of the Arabs are looking to the Americans to think there is some abstract notion. And finally, I would say, Who are you to appoint yourself as the leader of the global south? Has anybody elected you? So in fact, nobody is looking for a shepherd. Global south is not a bunch of sheep looking for a shepherd to deliver them. This is our discourse, internal discourse. It's nothing to do with, and a few academics in Western universities who love this term, operationally, everybody's dealing with power.
Yeah. So China, by the way, has 32 countries in the so-called Global South, all stood up under their BRI projects, Belt and Road Initiative. And for all of that, all those projects work on debt from the Chinese, which is not given out at low interest rates like IMF. And the Chinese, if you can't return their money, they take the project. As we know, next door in Sri Lanka, the port of Hambantota has gone to the Chinese.
Hi, I'm Rahul Jaktiani. So Asim Munir has been, well, Pakistan has been cozying up to the US, and the US is entertaining Pakistan. And that's seen as a weakness in India's foreign policy. Why do you think that is, given that we do the same? We have a, we don't have a unilateral foreign policy. We're in bed with Israel, yet we have excellent relationships with Iran. We continue buying oil from Russia, or at least we were. And we want to be in the good books of the US as well.
We never stopped buying oil from Russia. We never stopped.
Okay, we never stopped, but
go ahead.
Maybe the narrative has been that we've reduced our purchases or whatever. So why do you think that is seen as a demerit for India's foreign policy when we actually practice the same with vis-a-vis all the other countries?
It's only a few commentariat that is making that point, right? But everybody in the world is doing it. Trump himself has to lift the sanctions against Russia because he needs to deal with the new situation. So I think, look, everyone is a realist in operational terms. But you created a discourse in India. Somehow we are pure, we are the greatest things since sliced bread, we always take moral positions. That is never true. So the notion that Pakistan, Pakistan was always friendly to the US, but if you see last 4 years, under the Biden administration, there was not even one phone call from Washington to Islamabad. The Secretary of State Blinken won't even entertain Pakistani foreign minister. Okay, Trump has taken a different approach. You can say, but Pakistan is an ally of the United States. It's always been one. So why are we surprised by that? But I think the problem has been it's our elite insecurity, immaturity, I would even say, to constantly worry about what Pakistan is doing. That is the problem. It is not the way the world works. For example, is Pakistan's diplomacy more important than the $8 billion deal that Google does at the AI summit with India? Or that Pakistan is organizing a peace conference, that's more important? On AI, on technology, you're doing with the US a scale that is equal to some of the big things the rest of the world is doing. But if you don't want to take that into account, oh my God, Pakistan, look at them, suddenly they're everywhere. But this is our insecurity, it speaks to our insecurity rather than the reality on the ground. I mean, all of you business people, you go to Bangalore, 100,000 American passport holders live there. They're engaged in a way with the Silicon Valley, which nobody does. So I think, we should be confident in our own steam, rather than worry about Pakistan. Because I think I can understand why it is. Because of partition, Pakistan looms large on our mind. But we shouldn't let it, as I said, we are 10x bigger than that.
And getting bigger all the time.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Chenmaya. Am I audible? Yeah, great. I'm Chenmaya. I have a quick question. I mean, in terms of, much as it is likely an exercise in futility to second guess Trump or US at this point, what are likely red lines which would force their hand one way or the other in terms of extent of participation and do so conclusively? And in your opinion, would these likely be political, geopolitical, or economic in nature? In other words, what do we actually watch out for if we were to,
All of them, right? I mean, they're all so interconnected now. Whether it's oil, whether it's the energy issue, whether it is Gulf regional order in the Middle East. Question, what happens if Trump actually does a deal with Iran? How it will affect China and Russia? Everything is integrated, because I think what we're seeing is the Middle East has always been volatile. But today I think it's coming to a denouement, right? Coming to a point where Trump and Israel want to fundamentally rearrange this region. If they prevail over Iran, I think that's very much on the cards. So that's where we are. And we'll know in the next week whether there'll be a deal or there's going to be even more bigger war. My own sense is if there's no deal this week, there'll be a total war. And if the IRGC decides to burn down the whole region, Americans will have to go up. They have to double down. They have to escalate. And where that takes us at this point, we don't know. But one thing you can say, look, either next few days, there's some kind of a deal will come through. Or I think we're seeing a much bigger war with much greater consequences.
You don't see a possibility where US will just take an interim exit and leave everything in a mess that the rest of the world has to deal with?
Look, I think, we always think of America. Look, Americans have been fighting around the world for 100 damn years.
I don't think if you start, say, somewhere in the middle of the 18th century, I don't think there's been a 25-year period when Americans were not fighting a war. For a long time amongst themselves, they fought wars against the French, they fought wars against the British. So they are a warrior nation in a way. Now, for them, they think that they can use military power to achieve their own political ends everywhere. That's the reality.
This is Munesh. One question here that, we are 4 weeks into the war. Let's assume that it takes another 2 to 4 weeks because beyond that is a very dark scenario. If the war gets over, then who are the winners? Is it Russia? Is it China? Is it US? Is it India?
It's not over yet.
No, assume. That's what I said. If it goes beyond 4 weeks, then we have a very stark situation to deal with.
No, if Trump gets a deal with Iran, you can say clearly he would be a winner. But if he has to fight 2 more weeks, send in ground troops at more cost, that is uncertain what the outcomes will be. So I would say the dice is still loaded in the US favor. That doesn't mean they'll succeed automatically. The question is how much cost is he willing to pay and how much cost he is willing to pay in his domestic politics. Those factors will come into play in 2 weeks.
And where are Russia and China in this?
Look, so China, for example, everyone says China is, in one level, you can say China is one because the focus on non-hydrocarbon, Chinese are leading, therefore they have a huge say. Everyone is going to turn to them if you want to reduce our exposure to oil. But the fact is, 2 years ago, everyone was praising China. Look at them, they got the Iranians and the Saudis together, fantastic. Chinese are going to be the new player in the Middle East. Not a word from them. They would like to see Americans, defeated, keep helping Iran a bit, but they're not stepping out to either defend their friends or to fight against the Americans. So if you are sitting in Beijing, I don't know, this story is going around, Xi Jinping hasn't traveled outside. If you see the Americans can take away, assassinate a leader from such distance, the fear that what Americans can do, or even looking at American military power, if you're sitting in China, can come 10,000 miles away, do what they're doing, I would take that rather seriously. If you're a great power, see yourself in competition with the US. So this notion China and Russia winning is actually, one thing I think problem with the American debate is the enough people who oppose Trump, they're willing to invent any number of arguments to say, look, how things are going haywire. So I don't think we should take it seriously. For Russia, Russians have already lost Syria. They're not able to do much here. Their own war is ground to a halt in Ukraine. So I think they have big problems, which Trump can walk away tomorrow. As somebody said, look, I'm $30 trillion guy, I'm far away, it doesn't affect me today.
I've got a beautiful ocean, 2 beautiful oceans.
So I think he's always got, Americans have that great advantage. All the battles are taking place in Eurasia. US is a distant power, separated by 2 oceans. They can switch. One day they can be friends of China, tomorrow they can be friends of Russia. That size as well as distance gives America the huge advantage.
Khanna, isn't actually going back to Israel and the US and this war, isn't one of the biggest problems we have globally is that Trump has no quality advisor around him. He's either got half-wits or sycophants. And they are basically just say, yes, you're right, Mr. President, or you have people like Hexeth who doesn't know what he's doing. So he's making it up every day. Second problem is Israel, from where the world sympathizing with them, Holocaust, etc., all that, for 50 years, they've become a bunch of brigands now. Because all they want to do is basically increase the amount of space they have, increase the geographical size, no compunction about what's happening to the Arabs. So they insist in their interest to break up Iran into many different little geographies, so they never get together again. So until these two issues are not thought through in the immediate future, particularly Trump, we're going to have complete uncertainty on the outcome.
There's no doubt. See, I think this again, the advantage of the United States is you can have someone like Trump, half the country is abusing him. 3 years later, some other guy will come and say, look, this guy was an idiot. I'm going to change policy. But in China, you can't say that. You're not able to say that in Russia. The guy has been 20 years in power.
Nor in Iran.
Yeah, nor in Iran. So I think the advantage of the US is, as I said, look, their economic size, their distance means they can adapt to a situation faster. And as a democracy, I think still a democracy, self-correcting mechanisms are still strong. So you have the whole tamasha for 1 year of tariff war. And the Supreme Court in the end says, sorry, it doesn't work. So I think that gives them actually room. We think it might be a setback for Trump, but the US has once again recovers its position in a different way.
Meanwhile, you call immense damage to the whole world.
No, but see, so those are the consequences, right? I mean, if you say, look, Trump is, playing with American power at the cost of the world, that's absolutely true. But then history is always moved by major powers doing what they like and the others having to adapt. So it's not, you can take a moral position, we can take a philosophical position, but in the end, other countries have no choice but to adapt what the big boys do. And that's the tragedy of international relations, right? I think that's also the main difference between domestic politics and international politics. In domestic politics, there is a Supreme Court, there is a parliament that can change the laws, there is a higher authority that can resolve disputes between competing actors. But in the international system, there's no higher authority. So the freedom of the sovereign states to make mistakes, blunders, and create damage, that's how the world works. And I think others have no choice but to adapt to it. While we can criticize it, we can do what we like, but in the end, the government of India, even if Trump is a complete crazy maverick, but what he does has effects on the rest of the world, given the size of the American power. And the same thing has happened to Israel. With barely 10 million people today, Israel acts like a superpower.
About 8 million Jews. 8 million Jews.
And 2 million Palestinians.
2 million Arabs.
I mean, in fact, their dominance of the Gulf today, what they're doing with that country. Because they're having problems as well. They're running out of troops. They're running out of, they don't have people are lost 2 months of schooling. They have problems of their own. But in a way, the military power has produced outcomes which would be considered impossible just a year ago.
It's totally funded by the US.
Yeah, of course, the backing. Having a big power support you makes a difference. But they also developed their own capability.
Yeah.
So, as for Dadagiri, this is not new. Thucydides wrote it, 300 BC or thereabouts?
Yeah.
The Greek general. I don't remember the exact line, but something like, the powerful do what they wish, and the weak endure what they must.
My name is Kaustubh. I take care of finances for a family office. I'm just worried about the power do what they do. Can China take over Taiwan and create another such situation here? That's something I wanted to hear your thoughts on, because Israel had an objective of eliminating their enemy, so to say. So can China do a similar thing to Taiwan and create another situation for the world?
They would love to. At this point, that's what many fear. Look, the Americans are moving troops into Middle East. They're moving defensive systems there. If the US gets preoccupied in the Middle East, Chinese will fancy their chances. So I think that's where the distribution of power is what matters in the international system. Now, what is clear is, can the Americans fight in Europe against the Russians, against the Iranians in the Middle East, and also against the Chinese in the Indo-Pacific? So these are questions. So even in the end, the greatest power can't fight everywhere. So does it adapt? Does it create new situations? So that is the big question.
Well, just to add to that, The Chinese are not stupid. The Chinese economy runs on exports. The Chinese internal demand has been declining. Their demographics are short. China's average age now is 40.6 years. America is 38.5. So China is already older than America. America will only get to 40.6 in some 2040 because America is getting immigrants and America is producing babies, and immigrants also produce more babies. China will not get immigrants. So Chinese have a problem. They now have $1.2 trillion of trade surplus. A lot of that comes from America. Now 700 billion, I think, that is despite tariffs. They will not create a situation where they use that trade advantage because that will destroy their economy, that will destroy their currency. The Chinese have worked very hard to keep their currency weak. Right? In India, we have currency nationalism. Currency should be stronger. If you see the American fight with China, it's always been that you are doctoring your currency to keep it weak. So your exports become more competitive. It's an indirect subsidy. So for the Chinese to do it is going to be tough because economic risks will be very high. So that's also a kind of mutually assured destruction. Today, China gets 10% of its trade surplus from us Indians. This year about 120 billion from their calculations because they add customs and freight, insurance, etc. So Chinese are much too dependent on their exports. Chinese economy domestically is not firing at all. You should read up stuff that's coming out of China. That said.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. Very insightful. My name is Tej. I do both public and private investing. So as an investor, it's a great time if you're sitting on money because you can buy a lot of stuff very cheap at the cost of war. But my question was, there are two scenarios, right? One is a good scenario where there is a, let's say, a potential settlement that can be reached between Iran and America. On the bad scenario, which is likely scenario, like you also said, right? On the other scenario, what options does Iran really have? And how much can they sustain? Because a lot of, what I understand, or at least we read in the press, that a lot of their military power has been destroyed. So if there is a, let's say, all-out war, how much longer can it go? And, obviously they will have to again come back to the table, I'm assuming, to settle, right? So this question was like, how much of, sustainable power they have?
I think, again, I would say the point we were making earlier, don't think of Iran as a whole. There is IRGC today. There are Iranian people. There are other groups. So you got to think within the IRGC. I don't know if you've seen the report last 2 days. President Pezeshkian is having arguing with the IRGC guys. Look what you're doing. He's going to finish off our economy. So I think there will be, in any war, how a society looks at those compulsions, how it affects different groups, will always be real. But at this point, I think we got to see the disaggregated manner of what are the choices. Would those choices make in Iran make more amenable to a deal? Or if the IRGC say, look, I don't give a damn, I'm going to lose power, I'm going to bring Iran down. So I think we got to differentiate between the way IRGC calculates. A lot of people hope the army there is called the Artesh, whether the army will think differently. Can they break out? Can the groups within the IRGC separate, saying that, look, the leadership is making a mess? So I think those are the fault lines we got to see. And I think, as you know, in any trade deal or any deal, the internal negotiation is always far more consequential than the external negotiation. So wars always produce elites to say, look, what is it doing to me? And I think that is the internal argument. How that plays out, I think, is key. But I don't think we have enough knowledge or information of what is going on inside Iran to figure out. Trump is hoping this guy who's supposed to be a smart guy, the Kalibaf, the Speaker of the House, he'll be actually doing a deal. Whether his attempt to do a deal will actually make the hardliners go even further. We don't know. That's where the fight internally goes on. And I think the choice. Same thing with the US as well. If it doesn't go well, you have the Congress. Last week there was a resolution, which Democrats sponsored a resolution opposing the war. It lost 57 to 43. So that's only about 5 guys change, you are in a different place. So the internal dynamic in a war is always far more consequential.
First,
Please speak at the microphone.
yeah, am I audible? Yeah. Evening, myself Shubhain Bhattacharya, and I have two very important and closely linked questions. First is that over the coming weeks and months, how do you see India maneuvering itself between these two poles? One is you have the BRICS Plus, where we are the chairman and Iran is a part of it. And the other side, we have the Quad Summit, which was not held last year but is expected to be held this year. How do you see India maneuvering between those two? And the second question is that we'll see an arms race developing in Asia from the Pacific to Mediterranean Sea. Does it presents more challenges than opportunity for us, or more opportunity than challenges for us? A new arms race in Asia. Thank you.
See, there is no maneuvering between BRICS and Quad. What has BRICS done lately? Has anybody heard from them? The war has gone on for 4 weeks. 2 members of the BRICS are fighting with each other. UAE is saying, boss, let's go and take on the Iranians. They pose the biggest threat. UAE is a member, Iran is a member. Saudis were invited, they didn't join, but they're seen as one of the members. So now, when the BRICS are fighting with each other, but we're framing in this country the debate as if BRICS is a collective.
And India and China are also in BRICS, right? Each of us has got 100,000 troops lined up on the line of actual control.
So there is a mythology that is created, this multilateral institute like BRICS. No, you can once in a while sit and posture against the, big boys West is fine, but the internal contradictions are so deep. The notion that BRICS will act collectively is a complete myth. Right now, Quad, Trump doesn't seem to be too interested. So we're not talking about a Quad summit either. For Trump, if there's a China problem, he'll still need India. We need Americans if you want to deal with the China question. So I don't think at this point what Quad says, what BRICS says is completely irrelevant. What matters today, what Iran says, what Americans say, and what Israelis say. And their internal politics, whether that will arrange. And within that, what the Gulf Arabs, will they join the fight tomorrow? Or will they going to step back? Are they going to contribute in some form? That is the real story. So don't get sidetracked by this grand design of this BRICS and Quad going to do something. On the arms issue, South Korea, which we don't pay attention to them, they've sold the largest number of arms to Ukraine and Poland in the last 5 years. They've sold nuclear reactors. If you had a good industry, we should have been selling nuclear reactors in the Gulf, but it is the South Koreans who sold 2 1,000 megawatt reactors to the UAE. So UAE produces more nuclear power than probably
probably India at this point. Yes.
So you have actually the technological capabilities and the capacity to seize opportunities. I would think there'll be opportunities for those who look for opportunities. But if you're a fundamentally focused on posturing rather than seizing market opportunities that come in any war, as I said, the previous speaker said, look, there's always going to be opportunity.
Yes, please go ahead. But before you go, I'll just a footnote. Since we talked about Galibaf is also a former IRGC brigadier. Not just any ordinary brigadier, he commanded the IRGC Aerospace Forces. So he is a guy from within the system.
Yeah, hi, this is Somnath Mukherjee here. So one of the things that came in as images from the war recently, yesterday, was the image of an American E-3C Sentry AWACS taken out very precisely by an Iranian Shahed drone, presumably a Shahed drone given the blast radius that was visible. Now, we saw in Op Sindoor and some of the things that Shekhar mentioned, stuff that the Indian military is doing with a submarine contract with TKMS or Rafale or whatever else. It looks like we are doing exactly, the Indian military is doing exactly what it has done for the last 70 years, which is import a whole lot of stuff. Now, is that the most efficient way of preparing ourselves for the sort of wars that we are seeing, which is even the American military-industrial complex is struggling to keep up with the expense in terms of munitions and everything. So this import fetishized defense, is the Indian military a big bottleneck structurally in terms of the vulnerabilities that we have?
I think you're making the case for Indian serious reform. I think the government itself is saying, look, we've got to produce more at home. But what we've not seen is the kind of reforms that are needed at home to really focus more on production at home. That also doesn't mean you try to do everything yourself. Can you do partnerships? Today, 40 years ago, Brazil started producing Embraer aircraft in partnership with Italy. Today, they're a big seller. So both the fetish of saying, look, I'll do everything at home, or I say I'll only import, I think you've got to find that industrial policy balance where hopefully we'll get there. A second point you made, the dramatic change in the technology of warfare with the drones, with the kind of cheap way in which we saw it in the Ukraine war, we saw it in the Op Sindoor, we saw it in now, seeing it right now. So adaptation, can we adapt to that? I think that's the big debate right now. Can you adapt to a drone warfare where cheap defensive stuff can make a big difference to this expensive, sophisticated arms? So that's a central question in terms of defense industrial policy that's already come out.
Well, if you see this E3C Sentry destruction, this does not look like a Shahed drone came from 500, 600 kilometers and hit this. This is a very precise hit. This looks like either a first-person view drone launched from somewhere close by, like the Ukrainian operation from the back of a truck. And if it was a drone that came from that far, then it got precise targeting from a satellite, right? That satellite is not Iranian. Iranians don't have a satellite like that. And that's a big lesson for us in India. And I think that's one of the lessons that we learned in Op Sindoor. And I will just tell you something which is public knowledge. Within 9 days of Op Sindoor ending, we launched PSLV with a bunch of satellites. That mission failed because obviously the need for more satellites was felt. That mission failed. Then, not long ago, yet another PSLV mission was launched with very valuable satellites, and that was also launched. So while you buy weapons, you scale up your numbers, you also have to, everybody also realizes that you have to have something up there that helps you, that gives you what is called as ISR ability, that is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, which in this case, obviously, one of the two big powers, either the Chinese or the Russians, or maybe both, are giving to the Iranians. And India has to remember that in future, maybe something happens with the Chinese, Americans will share something with you. But something happens with the Pakistanis, Americans will not share satellite information with you. Remember, go to the NATO website and see NATO members, and the next category is major non-NATO allies. Pakistan is listed there.
I am Achin, I work in the fintech space. From whatever I have read, Iran's deterrent has been to kind of be 2 steps away from making a nuclear bomb. Whichever way this war pans out, if any semblance of, IRGC or army or whatever, is there a real risk that Iran will try to race to a nuclear bomb now?
So to which I will also add a subscriber question. Will this war lead the Islamic Republic to rush towards acquiring nuclear weapons capability instead of its stated goal of preventing nuclear proliferation?
Well, you can flip the question and say, look, if Iran had the nuclear weapons, would the Americans have attacked them? In fact, the problem is Iran has not been able to make it. Those North Korea made it, therefore nobody does anything against them. So the problem is now the lesson people are going to learn is Islamic Republic will not be allowed to make a nuclear bomb. And I think for that, they're willing to go to the complete war. The fact is, they've not been able to do it all these years. The question is, what do the others do? What does Saudi Arabia think? Look, how do I protect myself? What are the South Koreans saying today? Most countries in the middle power range, even Europeans are talking now of a European nuclear bomb. So countries feel that if we don't have this big weapon, you're more vulnerable. Therefore, the incentive for nuclear weapons is growing, but Iran is not the one which is going to benefit. I think it's only going to be an example rather than the example of the case why you need to have nuclear weapons. If you're a middle power, if you want to secure yourself, you need this capability.
Sorry, hi, can you hear me? Yeah, this is Utpal again. On the point of the nuclear weapons with Iran, I mean, till now they themselves said we don't have long-range missile capabilities, right? And supposedly they do have them. So, I mean, there's no certainty that they don't have a nuclear weapon, right? They may just not be using it unless it's a
No, I
form of
think
desperate measure.
it's quite clear. They got material for 10 weapons. That's what is being said.
Right.
But what has been demonstrated is missiles with longer range can produce effects even without nuclear weapons. The fact that Israel is under attack today, every day missiles are getting through despite a 5-layer defense system, tells you even with conventional weapons, with long-range missiles, you can produce political effects.
No, what I meant, sir, was that since Iran itself had been sort of lying about their capabilities, I'm saying they themselves have been saying we don't have a nuclear weapon as of now, but that itself could be a lie. That's all. That's my only sort of potential, debate question, if at all.
No, I don't see it's a question of lying. They never said they had it actually. They've always, in fact, I think they've always said
they always said they don't have it, right? And they won't.
No,
his
point is that they are saying they don't have it. Could they be lying? And one day they'll unleash a nuclear weapon.
The problem, there is clearly, what we know from public information. If they had it, it would have been very difficult to attack them. Fact is, they were going there. They would probably in another 2-3 years they would have gotten there. One reason why probably Israel felt the need to attack them now is that.
Because they have a specific purpose for the nuclear weapon. That is annihilation of the state of Israel. No other country that has nuclear weapons has that specific purpose. Pakistan has it, but they don't say it like that. We just had the former High Commissioner of Pakistan to India say in a TV discussion that if America attacks Pakistan, what will we do? We will nuke Delhi and Mumbai, right? So, but they also don't say it. Only Israel, because they don't accept the existence of a state. So, Iran, that is the difference.
Hi, can you hear me? My name is Anand Menon. I have a very simple question. Is there any logic to the timing of this attack? This war could have happened maybe 1 month back, 1 month later. Was there anything that happened just prior to this for it to get triggered?
It won't take them together.
You can take it. I think it's a quick question.
I think my sense is, if you remember last year, we had the bombing campaign against the nuclear weapons program. I think clearly the Americans said, look, everything we finished, but quite clearly they knew it had not been done. I can only see that as an immediate provocation. But as we said earlier at the beginning of the conversation, for Israel, Iran has been an existential threat. The ideology of Iranian Islamic Republic is something they've been at it. But probably they thought this time has come. The longer you take, the more harder it is going to be to defeat the Islamic Republic, and then they chose the timing now.
And Raja, hasn't there been an issue that Iranians have with UAE and Dubai as well?
Of course, the territorial issue. It's interesting, countries, like Iran sees itself as a dominant power of the region. Well before the Islamic Republic, the Shah of Iran, the British were leaving the Gulf in 1971. Just before they gave independence to UAE, the Iranian, that was Shah of Iran, took 3 islands that were off the coast of UAE.
1971.
Just one day before independence. They said, okay, let's grab it. I mean, same thing China did to Vietnam. When the Americans were leaving, they grabbed the Paracel Islands. So Iran sent troops, Shah of Iran sent troops into Oman. He's destabilized Afghanistan. So Iran seen itself as a regional power. As you know, they also talk about civilization. In fact, one of the first superpowers was Iran. There was Greece, Rome on one side and Iran on the other side. So they have this great sense, though they took Islam from the Arabs. They think Arabs are no comparison to them. They're much superior. Their sense of superiority is always reflected. And the size, 90 million people, talented people, technical capabilities. So they see themselves as the dominant power of the region. And I think that is the deep source. So when Iran sets up militia groups, we are so worried about Pakistan's cross-border stuff. I mean, Iran has done much more. In fact, by creating minority groups, by creating revolutionary groups and arming them openly, brazenly. So when Arabs are angry with Israel, we don't seem to understand that just as we upset with Pakistan what it does with cross-border proxy groups, Iran has done it at a much higher scale. And that's why the Arabs are insecure. They need American support, or Israeli support even for that matter, to deal with the Iranian threat. And I think that is the deep structural problem that will endure irrespective of the Americans come and go, because within the region, the fear of Iranian hegemony means these guys will always look for somebody else to take care of them. And I think that problem is not going to disappear.
I think what you meant to say was Arab fear of Iran, not Israel. So.
Yeah, hi, I'm Pujita Chowdhury, and I'm a film producer. I basically work with filmmakers around Asia, Europe, and Africa in 40 countries. And so my question is, as a consequence of this war, as far as Indian interests are concerned, what do you think are the most time-sensitive, critical steps the Indian government needs to take with all these warring countries? Because we are already, as a consequence, being affected deeply, the Indian diaspora in the US, in the Middle East, and then, of course, the impact on, whether it's gas and whether it's LPG or even gas and diesel that are going to get affected by this war. I understand that when you said earlier about leveraging your own country's interests, even a moral conscience aside, but what do you think is the right way for India to protect ourselves in this crossfire?
I'm Shivine once again. My question is that over the last few years, we have seen the form of revisionism that has come up in Russia, in China, in Iran, even we can say under Turkey, under Erdogan. We have seen this form of revisionism, and even in the US, with this new imperial dominance of the Western Hemisphere. So in this kind of revisionist history, where does the powers in the periphery, like India, like the Gulf and other countries, can navigate going forward if these entrenched revisionist mindset keep on gaining more and more power in these revisionist countries? Thank you.
So 2 questions. One, the key things you want India to do to protect our interests. And second, a lot of the powers in the world are going the revisionist way. How does India navigate this?
Look, I think there's always the short term and the long term. Right now, can you get gas cylinders to everybody in the country? Because of the crisis, because while oil you're getting from different sources, much of the cooking gas comes through the Straits of Hormuz. Therefore, what do you do to deal with it? I mean, you have long-term technical solutions for it. If you use your own industrial waste, agricultural waste to produce biogas, you can take care of a large part of your requirement. But that'll take you 10 years. But at this point, managing the crisis is everything for the government of India, because the effects of the crisis on energy, on internal inflation, remittances, rupee price, everything is involved. I mean, entire economy is tied to that. Longer term, energy diversification, producing more alternative energies at home, producing more, securing, what we mentioned earlier, strategic petroleum reserve at home. So I think all those steps can only be done over a period of time. But of course, as most countries, when the crisis is off, you back to the happy situation. But I think the near term is the immediate management of the crisis. The longer term issues, I think everyone knows whether the crisis will wake us up into starting on some of them. What stopped you from keeping a reserve for 200 days? Why is it only for 45 days? Well, Japan has for 225 days. So these are decisions that need to be taken long ago, but hopefully some of them will get taken. But those are the major issues, I think. On the question of revisionism, look, what does China do in Galwan? So it's not, you don't have to worry about revisionism in the Gulf of America, right? Yesterday, Trump said, let's call Strait of Hormuz a Strait of Trump. Okay, he can do his imperialism bit in North America. He's not even hiding it. For us in Greenland, with the NATO allies, he's saying, look, Greenland is mine. We are facing it ourselves, with the Chinese, for example, in the Himalayas. You've been facing it for 70 years. The question is, have we done enough to deal with those problems? So it's not suddenly a new problem. What it tells you is, if you're not strong enough, if you can't defend your own country, the revisionists will have their way. So that is as simple as that, because there is, as the earlier question, what Sid asked, there is a jungle raj in that sense, in the international system. In the end, you have to take care of yourself. And if you can't, you pay a price. That is the story. I think most countries would step up on defense. You're going to see dramatic expansion of defense expenditures across the board. Whoever can do it, they're going to do it. That's the direction I think most countries will go.
Ayaz Memon, that's the quietest I've seen in a long time. So you have to have the last word. Get the mic to him. That's Ayaz Memon, my old friend and top-class cricket writer.
No, it's been an enthralling conversation that we've had with Raja and with you, Shekhar. So this is not my domain expertise at all, but I'm just trying to understand. We are on the cusp of a world war in a sense. We've had a couple of world wars earlier. What is it? Much as we say that we've got a dominant power and therefore we have to kind of be reactive to what might fall our way or not and make the best of the situation. But there were triggers that started those wars, and there was something that ended those wars. Can you spell out what can be done to urgently end this situation, which might actually bring down the whole world in a sense?
No, there is diplomacy to end the war. That is going on. But the logic at this point of the structural enmity between Islamic Republic and Israel, between Islamic Republic and the United States, and between Islamic Republic and the Gulf Arabs are so deep. It is those built-in structural contradictions of the last 5 decades that have today come to a head. Can we stop this? Attempts are being made, and that's where we are in the middle of that effort. No one knows at this point it will succeed. As Trump says, look, if there's no deal, and he says, look, yeah, these guys are my best friends. He's actually being very good, this Kalibaf. We're going to get a deal tomorrow, in the next 2 days. We don't know. He said so many things. The deal doesn't come. You are absolutely right. There will be escalation. It's going to see more and more countries join this fight. And I think it's going to be a bigger mess than it is today. But that's the story of human tragedy, right? Are you wise enough to prevent conflicts? Can you act in time? Can you, as somebody said, can you control your territorial ambitions? Like Putin, did he need more territory in Ukraine? Or you could argue the other way, did NATO need more countries as members? But this is how history moves, right? I think whether we are smart enough to reduce the danger, or we're going to see a lot worse. But I think history has always moved in a tragic violent use of force. Sometimes you avoided conflict, but many times you've not been able to. We seem to have come to a place today, war in Europe for 4 years. Can you believe it? It's longer than the Second World War today. A war in the Middle East. One, as somebody said, Taiwan probably is ripe. So we are just when world economy seem to be moving, we have these big conflicts. What happens with them? You can only hope. But at this point, I think our job is also to analyze, not merely hope for the best, but to see, look, how do we manage this? How do we protect 1.4 billion Indian people from the negative effects? This is not going to come from a hope and a prayer. It can only come from actual policy action.
I think that's a good note to conclude this with. Ayaz, you asked a very good question in the end. It took some coaxing. Every country in the end works in its own interest. You see, Egypt, while its foreign minister is in Pakistan, setting up, if not Islamic NATO, the Islamic Quad, Egypt issued the strongest statement today on the Houthis threatening to block Bab el-Mandab. Because for Egypt, blocking of Bab el-Mandab means the revenues on Suez Canal stop. And Egypt cannot survive without the revenues of Suez Canal. So every country works in its own interest, and we can be quite sure that everybody is watching this very, very carefully. I know we can carry on for a long time, but everybody has to go home. Raja has to get some food after his much food for thought that he's given us.
So thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience.
The Print off the Cuff. Presenting partner Edelweiss. Exchange partner NSC. Experience partner The Quorum. Beverage partner Shivas Lux Collective Perfumes.